Good morning, good afternoon, depending on what part of the country you're in. Thank you so much for joining us today for our monthly Ajera virtual user group. Today's topic seemed to be popular. We had a lot of people sign up, so hopefully this will be really a fun and educational hour to spend together. And today we're going to focus on billing rate tables, understanding the rules and the exceptions. My teammate Shauna and I really brainstormed and chose this topic because this is something that comes up with us literally every day working with clients. So I think we've put together some really great curriculum and ideas here to present to you. And I'm just going to start us off with a little bit of housekeeping. So as we go through today's user group, we truly want this to be interactive. This is a time for you all to be sharing ideas and asking questions. So please submit your ideas and your questions in the questions box on the GoToWebinar panel. We won't be monitoring the chat box. We'll answer as many questions as we can during the hour that we have together today. But if for some reason we don't get to your question during the meeting, we'll follow up with an email. We will make sure all the questions get answered. And after today's meeting, you will receive a survey, and your feedback is very, very valuable to us. So we really ask that you just take a moment. It's only a few questions, but we're looking for your ideas and your feedback on how we can make these the best that they can be. There is a handout in the handout section of the GoToWebinar pane that you can retrieve. It doesn't have very much information in it because these are intended to be casual sharing of ideas with you all as Ajera users. These meetings are recorded. So in a few days, this will be up on our website. So if you want to go back and review the content, the best way to do that is to look at the recording. All of our past user groups are there too. So if you weren't aware of that, you can peruse the topics and review other things that we have focused on in these monthly meetings. If you're interested in receiving CPE credit for this hour, you must answer all 3 polling questions and complete the follow-up survey. I'll remind you of that to the point where you'll probably get weary, but I want to make sure no one is disappointed. Just a little bit about StandBonS. I think most of you are aware of StandBonS, and some of you, I recognize names. I know that we've worked together, and a lot of you have attended our previous user groups. But for those of you who might be new, StandBonS is a very interesting and dynamic firm. We've been in business for over 100 years. I love saying that. I think it's really unusual in today's world. But for the past 60 plus years, the focus of our firm has been on the A&E space. So we have many professional services teams that are constantly researching and reading and attending events to keep up with all of the changes that are affecting our clients in that space. So I really encourage you to kind of check out the website. There could be other services that might really be helpful to you. So just a little bit about us, but again, going to the website and researching will certainly give you a lot of information about the firm. And we're going to take just a brief moment to introduce ourselves. I know we only have an hour, so we don't want to take up too much time. My name is Val Higgins. I'm the Managing Director for Project Management Services and the Ajera Consulting Team. I've been working in the A&E space really my entire working career. What I always like to share so that you all know is that I have sat in your seat. So I worked in a multidiscipline engineering firm for 13 years. For 10 of those years, we used the Ajera platform. So I understand the day-to-day pains, and I think that you'll find that Shauna and I really focus on presenting practical solutions. We know that's what most of you need. I've also been a Deltek Axiom and then Deltek Ajera consultant, and I've had the opportunity to present and train, especially focused on project management for the past 5 or 6 years. So that's a little bit about me. I'm going to let Shauna go ahead and introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Val. So as Val mentioned, I'm Shauna Pace Powers, and I feel like we have a pretty similar background. The last 20 years of my career I've spent in the AEC industry, and I actually implemented Ajera in 2006 for the environmental engineering firm that I worked for. So again, boots on the ground kind of experience. I've worked in consulting for many years, so we've seen multiple clients using the software, etc. Anyway, it's just been a really good experience to have boots on the ground and working directly with clients. So we're going to give you some good tips and tricks today.
We sure are. Thanks, Shauna. So quickly, our agenda for today. Shauna is going to lead today's presentation. She's going to start off by walking us through just the basics, billing rate table setup fundamentals. And then one of the most common issues we see, missing billing rates, the dreaded yellow warning on our client invoices. And we've actually got a present that you'll receive, and I'll let her show you that. We're going to talk about invoice employee types. I think that's kind of a misunderstood tool a little bit. And then unit-based expense activities. This is another item where we can see issues commonly triggered. And then we'll have wrap up and QA, but as I mentioned, we really want you to be throwing your ideas and questions in that questions box as we go. These are meant to be interactive meetings. So just to kick it off, you know, what do billing rate tables in Ajera provide? And the one thing that I think they're really great at is flexibility. We have different clients and different contract agreements. And the way that the Ajera rate tables are designed is to provide the flexibility for you to be able to easily accommodate all of those various agreements. Billing rate tables in Ajera provide the ability to have different rates and markups based on our activity types. So you're all familiar with the way that Ajera categorizes our revenue and our costs for labor, expense, and consultant. We control those and can have unique billing instructions for each of those activity types within our billing rate tables. We also have the ability to have cost plus fixed fee markup tables, where we have some kind of contract that requires we use our raw labor rates plus a series of markups. There's some options with that are nuanced and sometimes misunderstood. So Shauna has prepared some really excellent examples to walk you through how that works and how those rates are accumulated. And again, we're going to talk about the unit-based billing rates. It's a powerful tool. It's one that I think sometimes is a little bit misunderstood. So hopefully we'll provide some clarity on that tool. And our billing rates are defined by employee, employee type, activity, unit-based pricing, and then also we do have those markups. And we're going to walk through, or Sean is going to walk through examples of how we can combine kind of all of these moving parts, again, to provide that flexibility we need to accommodate our various clients, contract types, billing situations. So without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Shauna to take us through Ajera.
Thank you, Val. Can you all see my screen?
We can.
Okay, perfect. All right, so when I think about billing rate tables, I don't always think about how we set these up from the very beginning. So in most of our user groups, we take you back to company preferences because there's some real setup items associated with rate tables that you may or may not be aware of. So I'm in my main setup menu under company and preferences. And we're just gonna pull this up for you guys to see how we can make some setups to engage our rate tables. So I'm just going to navigate over to our billing tab. And really, I'm focused on this right side of the billing tab setup. So this is where we can engage markups for labor, expenses, and consultants. So if we want to provide not just a pass-through, but a markup on our expense costs or consultant costs, we want to make sure that our checkboxes are selected for that. And this verbiage is specific to you. You can change this or modify this as needed. In addition, if you're a company that maybe works with government agencies and you need some kind of markup of costs for your billing rate tables, you'll also want to engage labor markups. You may have things broken down into multiple pieces, or maybe you just have an overhead rate and a profit rate. That's maybe a little more simplified, but this is where you engage those markups for your rate tables. All right, let's go take a peek at an actual rate table, and I'm just going to give you a little bit of an overview there. So our rate tables are set up in general and billing rate tables. And we've got a few examples here. Our goal across clients is to make this billing rate table list as manageable and hopefully as small as possible. We understand that you might need rate tables specific to a project or to a specific client. But if you have those kind of project specific types of rate tables, we really want those to show up as inactive, and I'll show you that in just a little bit why that's meaningful. This should be the list of rate tables that you're actively using and assigning consistently to projects. So I'm just going to peek at our standard rate table and talk about a few features of the rate table. So one thing that you guys understand in Ajera is that we really preach labor segregation versus expenses and consultants. And that's for costs, that's for rates, that's for our revenue. So that's why we have these segregated here. And again, as Val mentioned, this is our way to be flexible in the system and have different rates for different types of things. So pretty standard, a rate table is often dictated by the employee type. So the standard employee types that you have within your firm. This rate table happens to have an activity for BIM modeling so that when a drafter is performing that specific activity, they're going to generate a different rate than their regular drafter rate. They're doing a little bit higher level work in that example. All right, so we're driving those billing rates based on our employee type. That's pretty standard rate schedule. The other thing I want you guys to take note of is our date ranges. So one thing that you may or may not be able to do with clients is escalate your rates year over year. And that's something that we really look to and try to build into our contracts so that you're not stuck with a rate schedule that was developed at the time of that new project. So again, in this example, we're able to escalate year over year. So we had some historical rates that were maybe a little bit older. And then in 2021, we were able to develop that new set of standard rates and elevate those, escalate those. So important for you guys to kind of understand that we can escalate those directly within the setup of our rate table.
So Shauna, we have a couple questions.
Okay.
And if you wouldn't mind clicking on the labor tab again.
Oh, sure.
The reason we kind of labeled this the rules and the exceptions also is because what Shauna is showing, like with the expenses where we have a percentage and the consultant, that's kind of the rule. But the drafter example that she pointed out, that would be what we would call an exception. right? So that's what we meant by kind of rules and exceptions. But Shauna, this is something you talked to me about last night, and I actually learned something. So
Yeah.
Roger is asking, is the order of employee type and activity type or activity important?
So if I'm understanding Roger's question, one thing that you may or may not be aware of is the order of the employee type in our employee type list. So within setup and employee types, I'm just going to bring it up really quickly. That is the order that will be presented on a client invoice. So when we're developing this employee type list, generally, at least on time and expense types of engagements, you want to see that higher level rate at the top and kind of cascade down. So in this example, our principal rates will show first on our client invoice and so on and so forth. And you can reorder these employee types to kind of display how they're looking on the client invoice. But to, I think, answer your question, within the rate table itself, it doesn't matter the order.
Yeah, that's perfect. And then Sharon has a couple of questions. I think we're actually going to cover these, Sharon. She's indicating, Shauna, that using an overall standard rate table on a lot of projects recently experiencing trouble when an employee type changes. It changes the rates in those projects that use the old employee type. And she's tried to use the date range to correct this, but it doesn't always work. I think that we're going to give her the answers to that in a later section. Do you agree, or do you want
I
to
think
address
so.
that?
I may
Yeah.
need a little more clarification. So just again, to verify, if this is someone who is moving into a new position, so their standard employee type has been updated, but maybe the client doesn't want to pay that new rate for them. That's my clarification question. That one is a little harder to manage because their standard employee type has changed.
So in that case, we would use an exception and use their
Correct.
name and their new employee type to indicate the correct rate, right?
Exactly. And that's where we'll probably talk about an invoice employee type. That'll be one of our examples in just a little bit.
Yes. So we'll get your answer there, Sharon. And then questions are coming in a bunch
I
here,
love it.
Shauna.
That's what this should be about.
I
So
know. So Kurt is asking, when you enter a new date range, it usually gives me a blank slate to have to fill it out again. Is there a way to copy over? Oh, Kurt, you're going to be so happy to
So
hear
I
this
don't know if
answer.
you can see my screen, but there's a little arrow pointing to an existing set of rates. So this would have been our initial rates. You can actually copy those rates. And now we've got the same set of rates, but you can update the date range here. So I just right click, sorry, I'm going to go back one time. So I right clicked on the row that had an existing set of rates. I kind of have to click out of it. And I copied the date range. And so that's copying those existing rates. You can update the date range and then update your billing rates in that section. Okay. All right. Hopefully that answers those questions. So I think, Val, I'm about ready for our polling question, but as Val was mentioning, we have rules and we have exceptions in our rate tables. And right now, when I look at this markup rate table, our rule is we're not going to generate a rate. We're actually taking 0% times the employee's cost. That's how this rule works. Our exceptions are all listed below in this rate table where we have now our employee types.
driving a specific rate. If we don't have an employee type here, etc., we're going to start missing out on generating our billing rates. So I think in that, Val, let's launch our first polling question.
Yeah, I just want to a couple of things here, Shauna, and I don't want to set us behind schedule too much,
Yep.
but Tracy is asking how do you reorder the employee type list, and I've answered to all of you. It's a manually adjusted list. I think Shauna could show us that pretty quickly. There's just arrows, so you control the physical order that these are listed. So that's how you would do that. And I will go ahead and launch the first poll, which is, do you ever have the yellow missing billing rates error? And we'll just give this a few seconds. You all are coming in quickly, and we really appreciate that. And just as a reminder, if you're going to request the CPE credit for this hour, you'll need to answer all 3 of these polling questions and complete the survey. So it looks like we've slowed down with 87% of you casting your poll. We really appreciate that quick response. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. And Shauna, 80% of our attendees are getting this. So this is really good stuff. And I think that you all are going to have some great takeaways.
Great. And this is not surprising. I used rate tables forever, and things within the business change. You may have a new employee type that you add to your firm that, oops, we forgot to add onto our rate table. One thing that I think, Val, you and I stumble across in almost every client rate table that we've reviewed, there are some times where we have forgotten to set up a billing rate mechanism for our expenses and consultants. And we'll talk through some examples of that together. Other really common issues that we see, maybe we've put too much detail in our rate table where we've essentially identified the employee and the specific employee type and the specific activity that needs to drive a rate. I think our recommendation is simple is better, right? We're going to be more apt to capture a billing rate if those rate tables are simplified. Employee-based rates can be really challenging. You hire a new employee and they're not on that rate table, so they're not going to generate a billing rate. Date ranges on rate tables, I feel like we stumble across this one too. If you have a closed date range on your rate tables, there's the chance that new transactions come in beyond that date range, and we are not generating a billing rate for those transactions. The other thing that can happen is if we have unit-based or non-unit based expenses where someone has gone in and entered a unit. I feel like I found this all the time when I was reviewing expense reports, for example. So we'll walk through one of those examples together in just a little bit. There also are times where we actually intentionally are generating a $0 billing rate. I worked in a civil engineering firm with survey crews, and everyone needed to be able to enter their billable time on a timesheet, but only one individual drove that 2-man or 3-man crew rate. So there can be instances where that yellow highlight is actually okay. It was intentional. So we want to be mindful of that. Now, one of the things that I did before I prepped my draft invoices to go out to clients is I went through to double check any of those transactions that might be missing a billing rate. And I had developed a report. This was way before widgets, and I had developed an inquiry that would show me those those transactions that were missing a billing rate. But what you guys get today is an actual widget that is going to identify the rate table that is kind of broken, essentially is generating a $0 rate. And then you'll also get to see the project and specific transactions that are not generating a rate. So this makes things really transparent for you in your overall process. So I want you guys, when you have an opportunity to install this, and I'd really recommend using this, I mean, maybe you're doing it more actively once a week, but at least once a month before you launch those client invoices so that things are clean before they get to the project managers for review. All right, so we're going to go through some of our examples and fix rates on rate tables and see how that works with our invoicing process. So I'm in here in the transaction missing billing rates widget, and we can see that this broken standard rates rate table, we've got some issues. So I'm going to open this up so we can see all of the detail here. And I am also going to open up our client invoices. So we can see that for the majority of our entries with this broken standard rate table, they're showing up on the Oakland Heights Medical Clinic project. Makes sense. We've got our yellow highlight that indicates we're missing billing rates. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up and kind of see what's going on here. This will be waiting for us when we fix our rate table. The next thing I'm going to do is go into my project command center so that I can fix that rate table. Actually, I can just go straight to the billing rate tables. Come here. And we know that the broken standard rates table is broken because we can see that on our widget here. So I'm going to make some modifications to the broken standard rates. Okay, so we can see over here, I'm going to minimize this, that for whatever reason, Mary is not generating a rate table. So I'm going to look. She's designated as a project manager and she entered her time as design activity. So I go through my rate table, I am looking for project manager. And the only match I find is a project manager associated with Christopher Meehan. So in this example, the only person that is going to generate a billing rate with the employee type of project manager is Chris Meehan. Basically, we need to add project manager, a generic project manager, to our rate schedule. So we'll just add that. And then I'm going to save. Okay. The other thing I'm noticing is that Roger is not generating a rate on this rate table. And he's designated as a project administrator. Okay, looking through my rate table, I'm just going to sort because I can alphabetize, and I don't see project administrator on this rate table. So I'm going to go ahead and add that. Okay. The other thing I'm seeing are a lot of expenses on this rate table. So I think it's going to be one of those items where we didn't quite set up our expense and consultants to generate a rate. So I'm going to pop over to my expenses tab. And in that, you can see our markup currently is 0%. And guys probably know, but 0 times anything is 0, which is why we are generating that 0%. That's our rule, our $0 cost. We don't currently have any exceptions to that rule. But as soon as I select this checkbox under pass-through, now we have an exception to the 0% markup. Now we're going to pass through our expense activities at cost. Okay. All right. Let's see if those fixes fix the majority of our items. So I'm going to go into billing. And as you guys probably know, when you fix a rate table, that's all good and well for your new transactions coming in. But for existing transactions, we have to go through another step. So I am in that invoice for Oakland Heights, and I need to go in and recalculate my rates. You can see right here that we've got a bunch that are not generating a billing rate. And I can highlight these multiple transactions by holding onto my shift key. And I'm just going to right click in this blue space and recalculate my billing rates and cross my fingers. Yay. Okay, so we did something right. We updated that to pass through our expenses at cost. The next thing we want to do is take a peek at our labor. So that widget was telling us exactly what phases of our projects were having issues. So it looks like we've got some labor on design documents and construction documents. So we have to go into a couple of places on this % complete billing and take a peek. So let's look at our design documents. I'm just right clicking and clicking entries, or you can click this entries button at the top. And again, I'm just sorting to the top and I can see those $0 billing amounts pop right up. So I'm going to recalculate those rates. And again, it looks like our rate table is finding a match now for Mary and for Roger based on our changes. And then we'll go and do that for our construction documents as well. Just going to recalculate. All right, it's looking better for us. So when I save those changes, and it's spinning, and I pop out of my invoice edits, if I go back to this screen, you can see we no longer see that yellow highlight. So that means we no longer have issues with those overall rates on our rate table. And if I refresh this transaction missing billing rates, now we only have one issue. So, all right, I think that is a good set of examples. I'm going to show you how to fix this one in just a moment. So Val, I think we're ready for that next polling question, unless there's other questions that have arisen since I've been.
Well, I've been answering some questions,
Okay.
and you all are asking good questions, and I am replying to all, so you all should be able to see the questions and answers. But Stephanie asked, do employees select their own employee type, or is that assigned to their employee file in the employee menu? And that's a great question, Stephanie. So we do have the ability to let employees select alternate employee type. So by default, the timesheet is always going to want to use the employee type you've assigned in their employee record. However, some firms do have more complex situations where their employees are playing different roles, wearing different hats, need to bill at different rates on projects. So what Shauna is showing us is in company preferences, we can provide the option for employees to select an alternate employee type. We have to add a column into the timesheet. So this can be tricky. I just want to be really transparent. If we have the need to do that, then the system is giving us that. We have to really coach our employees. They have to really have a clear understanding from whoever's assigning them work about that, because otherwise it can become messy. So we don't see it used a lot. The only other thing I wanted to say before I launch our next polling question is that I had forgotten to load the instructions to save and install the dashboard that you'll be receiving, and it's really important that you follow those. We don't want you to make a mistake and overwrite all your dashboards. So you might want to retrieve that, and you'll receive that as part of a follow-up email too. So I'll go ahead and launch our second polling question, which is, do you need to show a different employee type description than your standard list on client invoices? And I do think one of you have asked a question about that previously, and I knew it would be covered. So again, if you are going to request the CPE credit, we do need you to answer all 3 of these polling questions and complete the survey. And you all are coming in pretty quick, but I am going to give this a few seconds just to ensure that everyone has their opportunity to cast their poll. Shauna, while we're waiting, did you want to add anything on about employees selecting employee types?
I agree, Val. It can be a little bit tricky. It's really important to communicate. I'll admit that in a small size firm, this seems to happen maybe a little more routinely, where we just don't have the same number of people to do different things on a project. So for example, I had principals who had to go out in the field and do site visits, and they knew that they billed at a different rate for that work. We just had very engaged project managers and very engaged staff, and it was very clearly communicated what their role was on each of their projects. So it just, it comes down to communication, really.
Yeah, agreed. So I'm going to go ahead and close our poll. 87% of you cast a poll. We appreciate that. So 57% of you said that yes, you do need to show alternate employee types. Shauna, before you launch into that, Giovanni has posed a question here. And Giovanni, I just ran into this recently with a client I was helping. And Giovanni is asking, is there a way to keep staff from copying timesheets where their employee type has changed due to a promotion, and it will cause issues, definitely. So the only way I know, maybe Shauna's going to know a different way, is what we did with that client is we went ahead and started the next timesheet for their employees so they had a clean slate, and then they sent an email out just saying, please don't copy. Shauna, you have any other ideas?
That is exactly what I have done in the past. And again, it comes down to communication, because you're exactly right. When you copy a timesheet, it is going to copy all of those historical employee types, etc., that you've used. And so that is a way that you'll not be generating the appropriate billing rate for your effort.
Yeah. So Giovanni, it's pretty quick for you to go and just start their next timesheet, and then they can't like copy for the current period. And then Christine asked, can you assign different types for the same employee based on the above being tricky? You can't, Christine. I'm sorry. We have our default type, and if we need to bill someone at different rates, we either use the exceptions in the rate table or switch types.
Right. So I think this is the potential example or answer to, I think it was Sharon's question about an employee who gets a promotion, but on some projects we still want to bill them at that lower rate. This is the potential where we would say, on this specific project, Christopher Meehan, even though he's been promoted to a senior architect, he really is going to show up as an architect on the client invoice. So this would be the $90 rate, and the invoice employee type would be architect. So again, those are tricky, and then we tend to have more project specific rate tables. We're really hoping that that clients understand that we are escalating and creating promotions and opportunities for our staff, and that Christopher is now doing a higher level of work, and so he should be charged out at that rate. But we also understand that sometimes you're stuck in those examples. All right. Let's see, other ideas. Oh, so again, with invoice employee types, sometimes the client has requested for an individual to look a specific way on their invoices. So for me, I worked with the Department of Environmental Quality, and we had to list all of their specific categories directly on the client invoice. So in that example, I'm going to go back here. We had project administrators, but they had to show up as something else entirely. Maybe they had to be a P1. And so in that example, I'm just going to create a new one quickly here. I would select that as their invoice employee type so that they showed up the way that the client wanted to see them. Now, our recommendation is once that invoice employee type has been assigned, we want to go ahead and inactivate that employee type. And that's so we don't inadvertently assign that to our different employees as a standard employee type. Okay. Any other questions floating around out there, Val?
Yeah, a couple.
Okay.
So Stephanie asked, does the employee type override the invoice employee type? And so Stephanie, the default employee type in the instruction on the billing rate table will determine the rate that is billed, but the invoice employee type will print on the client invoice. And the one thing to keep in mind with that too is this is only a client invoice reporting tool. So everywhere else in the system project reports, we're going to see that time associated with the default employee type. It's only on the client invoice that that invoice employee type will be printed.
Perfect. All right. There was one thing I wanted to show you just briefly. So this isn't as specific to maybe employee type driven rate tables, but maybe more of those government engagements where we have standard markups. A lot of people come to me with questions about what do all of these checkboxes mean? How do I get these rate tables to work for me? And I just wanted to walk you through kind of an example of accumulating standard markup rates versus not accumulating standard markup rates. And most, I would say, and Val, you tell me if this is your experience too, but most clients actually use the accumulated rate for those engagements. So accumulated rates are based on multipliers, and when we're not accumulating our rates, we're just adding each of those different items together. So I'll just kind of show you this example. So in this example, our employee cost is $25. We're going to, in a no accumulation, calculate what that cost times the DPE percentage is, that cost times overhead, cost times profit, and add all of those together to get our non-accumulated rate. Again, with our accumulated rates, we're using multipliers. So we have our cost, and then we have our cost times our DPE multiplier, and then we take that full amount and multiply it by our overhead multiplier, and then we take that amount and we multiply it by our profit multiplier to build that accumulated rate. So that's how those labor markups work together with the accumulate checkboxes. If you are locked down with rates for your government clients and we give Christopher Meehan maybe a raise, but our contract says we can't go over a maximum rate of $50 an hour, we have to create that exception in our standard rate table. And this is, Chris is usually paid $56 an hour, but due to our contract, we can only base our cost on $50 an hour. And so we build out that exception down below in our rate table. So that's a quick and dirty overview of markup rate tables.
Shauna, we do have a question from Cindy, and I do know this is something that companies that bill on markups face. Is there a way for the overhead percentage and profit percentage not to do rounding?
Ugh.
I know.
So you're right. That's a big challenge, and we find, unfortunately, that we have to create adjustment phases on our projects to force match those invoices that we're submitting for those entities. So unfortunately, Ajera's rounding is potentially different than the client's level of rounding, and we're unable to, I think it goes out to those 4 digits that we have.
Yeah, and then just a couple basic invoice. This is really more invoice format stuff, but I mean, easy to answer. So Giovanni said this might be an invoice designer question. It is, but it's easy. But how do you get the actual employee type description to print on the invoice? It's on the standard invoice formats, Giovanni, in the labor section. You control the amount of detail that is shown. So you can show employee name, employee type, notes, and what Shauna is showing you right there, you control this. When you play with this, what we would recommend is do the thing Shauna's doing and then preview. And you can pick any invoice and look at what your changes look like before you save. So mess around with it, get it to where you like, and then you can save.
Exactly.
Yep.
So you can preview that straight from there.
And
I have lots of fun in standard invoice formats. You can get them to do almost everything that you need. I don't have good data to demonstrate this today, but that's the process for sure.
Yeah, one more question from Sharon, Shauna.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is one of the most common things that we see. What is the pass-through column? Never could get that to work. It's pretty common for it not to be set up correctly.
So this is on a labor markup, is that correct? Or is she?
I'm thinking expense.
Gotcha.
But I'm not positive. And Sharon, if you want to clarify, you can.
Okay, so if it's more on expenses and consultants, again, I just always think of the rule versus the exception. So in this example, our rule, we're marking up our expenses by 15%, but maybe we have a specific activity where we don't get to generate that 15% markup. So I'm just gonna pick one. So for our fees and permits, if we want those to pass through just at cost, we would select that pass through checkbox.
And Shauna, could we just could we just quickly show maybe how we would have a full on pass through with no markup? And I was going to say we can further break the broken.
This is how I fixed that tab on our expense. So our expenses tab, this is where most of you think, okay, 0 is a pass-through. Well, 0 is a number. We're multiplying that times the cost, but our exception is the pass-through. So every expense activity in this rate table will be run through at cost. as a pass-through. Is that what the question was, Val? Do we think? Crossing our fingers.
Well, she said either or.
Okay.
So yeah. So I think
Okay.
we've got it. We've
Hopefully
shown
that
yeah.
answers that question. But again, I think this is probably the most common error we find in rate tables. And I'll admit, I had it in my database. I learned much too late.
Yeah.
Now, so Val, I think we're ready. We've got to push through to our next.
Yeah, we do.
question.
We need to keep pushing through.
So, do you have that pulled up?
Yes.
Awesome.
All right. Our third polling question. Do you have expense activities with standard unit-based rates? And again, just a reminder, if you need the CPE credit, all 3 polling questions need to be answered and the survey. I'm sorry to keep repeating that. I really don't want anyone to be frustrated. That's why. And you all are coming in pretty quickly here. So we'll just give it a few more seconds. Okay, it looks like we're slowing down here. 82% of you voted. So I'm going to go ahead and close this poll. 65% of our attendees, Shauna, said yes, 15% said no, and 20% don't know. So this is going to be great.
Okay, awesome. I'm going to try to push a bunch of content at you guys in the next 7 minutes. So one of the things that we find when we're working in rate tables often is that people will build out their entire unit-based rate schedule directly in the rate table. And our recommendation is to use our activities to generate those rates. The reason for that is if next year you have an updated rate for that activity, we can update that activity and that's going to push through all the rate tables that you're utilizing. So again, we can build out that unit billing rate directly in the setup of our activities. And that's just going to be on those rate tables that are designated, or I'm sorry, activities that are designated as unit based. Okay, those are your in-house expenses, field equipment that you charge out, maybe in-house mileage that you need to bill out, things of that nature. So I'm going to go through an example, and this is our last fix on our rate table that I need to make. Is within our reimbursable expenses. This is actually an example of an individual, Chris, entered travel on his expense report or her expense report and used a unit to try to generate a rate, even though this was not a unit-based expense. So I'm going to go into client invoices again, and we're on this BART station project. We can see that yellow highlight. And I'm just going to pop over to our expense and consultant tab. And you can see right now that we've got our $0 billing rate. One thing you may not normally see in your view is the cost units, and this is how we're going to be able to fix this issue. So I'm just going into that customize icon and bringing in an additional column of information, that cost unit. So you can see here we've got a cost unit, but we don't have a cost rate. We only have a cost amount. So we're taking 1 times 0, which is our rate, and we're getting a billing amount of 0. Now to fix this, we don't really want a unit, we just want the cost amount, and I need to clear out the unit as well for my billing units. And we're just gonna tab through here, and I'm gonna recalculate this and see what happens. So you can see that we now generate a billing value for that non-unit based rate. I ran into this all the time with my staff who saw the unit column on their expense reports and just had to put something in there. So this is something that we stumble across and have to fix pretty routinely. Okay, questions? And this is okay, actually, to override that. All right, Val, I feel like we made it through kind of quickly those last few examples. Are there any outstanding questions?
I've been trying to keep up with them as we go. And I think they're all pretty much around the same topics we've covered. So
Okay.
there are a couple questions I wasn't able to get to, friends, and I'm sorry, but as promised, Shauna and I will, we get a report of those, and we will go through and make sure that we send you an email so that you get your response. We want to make that happen for all of you. So I'm just gonna finish us up here and do a little quick summary in our last few minutes together. There we go, can get my PowerPoint to work. So best practices tips that we covered today: review your company preferences, ensure your billing preferences are correct for your billing requirements. Make sure you check those expense and consultant tabs. That's where we see a whole lot of challenges. Install and review the missing billing rate widget that you'll be receiving with this class. I can't load that in the GoToWebinar, so our marketing team will send that out with the following follow-up email. Please be sure to look at those instructions. If you're not careful importing dashboards, you can override all of your dashboards, so we don't want that to happen. If you're required to activate invoice employee types for client preferences or special situations, as Shauna mentioned, we recommend inactivating them after you use them, so they're not on your active list, which could cause budgeting issues if people select those when building budgets. And then just maybe make a review of your unit-based expense activities and their use on the billing rate tables to ensure that you're optimizing the efficiency they offer. They really are a great tool, I think. And we just please welcome you to complete the survey and give us your ideas. And also, we really want this to be a user group. This year it's been exciting. We've had some users co-present with us. And if you have a success story, if you've done something interesting or exciting in your Ajera or innovative that you would like to share, please reach out to me. We would love to collaborate with you and co-present with you in one of these user groups. If you complete the survey, you can let us know if there's topics you would like for us to cover in future meetings. Be honest, how are we doing? We want to continue to improve these and make these as helpful as we can for the group. If you haven't yet, consider joining our LinkedIn SN Virtual Ajera user community. We're trying to get some conversations started out there. That's a place where you can share ideas and tips, and our team tries to get out there and do that as well. So just share your ideas with you. We are so grateful that you have spent this hour with us. These meetings are really, really fun for us. With your follow-up email, you're also going to receive a special offer for a systems assessment. If that's something you think our team could help you with, we would love to have the opportunity to meet with you, talk with you, and see if there's any way our team might be able to help you. So Shauna and I hope that you have a great rest of your week. And again, we really appreciate you spending this time with us and all of the questions and interactions we had today. Thank you so much.